Welcome to the Bible Forum. It is August 18 on a Sunday night. I'm Warren Sprouse. This is the Bible Forum. The Bible Forum is a ministry of alternatives, biblical counseling and education incorporated. It's a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. Donations to this ministry are tax deductible. You will get a receipt. We would appreciate it if you feel led to help out with the costs. Click the donate button on the Bible Forum website, thebibleforum.net, and you'll go to PayPal. You can also write a check, give me a call. The phone number is on the website, thebibleforum.net, and I'll give you an address where you can send it. We're here every Sunday night to regale you with my opinions of what's going on in the world from a biblical perspective. We talk about politics, we talk about life, we talk about the Bible and other kinds of things. I try with all of the articles that I use to have them be generated from biblical principle. Here in the beginning, when we just look at a rundown of last week's events, there's usually a lot of negative. And it's kind of like, this is what you don't do. This is not what the Bible is all about. To begin with, have you heard about the economy? Apparently, it's in trouble. I don't know how this happened. Just all of a sudden, this week, the economy was in trouble. The stock market is responding to what experts call an inversion. I'm not in the market, I don't keep up with this stuff, but an inversion seems to be when a main yield curve inverts. It's been going this way, and now it's going that way. We're going along merrily as the market is on the rise, and then all of a sudden it appears to stop. They call it an inversion. Technically, they call it a 210 inversion. Historically, recessions tend to follow an inversion 22 months later. So now we're getting a lot of conversation about the pending recession. This is why the financial news is starting to be negative, unless you're watching or listening to or reading somebody who has their head screwed on straight. In the last 30 years, this has happened about every 10 years. The duration, the intensity seems to reflect liberal, often Democrat, administrations in Washington. The inversion occurring at the end of their term or immediately thereafter. In Jimmy Carter's case, it was 1980. The first George Bush in 1990s. Bill Clinton in 2000. The first George Bush had the smallest of all inversions. The exception was the second George Bush, the end of his second term in 2009. That recession lasted longer than the average, similar to that of Jimmy Carter. The president, when all of this happened, Barack Obama. So here we are again. It's 10 years later. The market is signaling this 210 inversion. This generally means nothing to the wealthy and the middle classes. Its effect is on the lower end of the economic scale and is not at all like a recession, which the scaremongers tend to want us to see coming. It takes a lot to kill an economic expansion, typically requiring a major shock to bring growth to a halt and trigger the recession. This week, investors signaled that moment may have arrived. And one big question is whether that shock has come from President Donald Trump's trade war or a mistake by policymakers at the U.S. Federal Reserve. Did they not lower the interest rates soon enough? If you ask President Trump, he puts the blame squarely on the Fed. Earlier this Wednesday, White House trade advisor Peter Navarro told Fox Business Network the U.S. Central Bank should cut rates by 0.5 percentage point, as he put it, as soon as possible. An action he claimed would lead to 30,000 on the Dow. A cut of that magnitude would typically be associated with serious economic risk, but not an economy with record low unemployment and ongoing growth, which is what we have now. The market slumped about 3% by close of business on Wednesday. And that was enough for people to start talking. But it was the bond investors who pushed the yield on 30-year Treasury bonds to the record low that it is. Did they do this out of fear or reality? President Trump blamed the Fed chairman, a man he appointed. He called that man clueless. Trump's an equal opportunity critic. But I think you can relax. It's all going to turn around in time, unless the Fed gets creative. Did you hear about Panis Kosarian? That's not exactly a household word, is it? Or a name. Seems she was walking home in San Francisco, about to enter her apartment building, when a man coming out of the building grabbed her, telling her she needed to be saved from robots. Oh, we know he was in the building because the camera that took the picture on the outside showed the attack. He was coming out of the building. Kosarian claimed he mocked her threat to call the police, saying, "They're not going to do anything to me," leading everybody to suspect that he had connection somewhere. Now, despite viewing the video, San Francisco Superior Court Judge Christine Van Aken released the suspect. His name is Austin James Vincent. She ordered him to a pre-trial diversion program. This is where you show up at a facility or at an office and you talk to people, or people talk to you. It's an incident that was horrifying to the victim. There is video to prove that it happened. The man is clearly not in his right mind and dangerous at one level or another. And he may actually live in her apartment building. Now, do you feel safe in San Francisco? Or how about Los Angeles? Now do you know why several counties, several areas of California are suing the state to be disconnected from it? Oh yeah. There is a coalition of 13 states that are suing President Donald Trump's administration. These are 13 states where you may not want to live. They're trying to block a new rule that would drastically reduce legal immigration by denying visas to poor migrants. The Trump administration's message is clear. If you're wealthy, you're welcome. If you're poor, you're not, according to Washington State Attorney General Bob Ferguson. He said this rule is un-American, anti-immigrant, and unlawful. The rule, unveiled on Monday and to take effect October 15, expands the definition of a public charge, allowing denials to visa applicants who fail to meet income requirements or who receive public assistance. Ferguson said the rule violates the Immigration and Nationality Act by redefining the concept of a public charge, redefining it in a way unconnected to its original meaning and Congress's intent. The lawsuit is similar to one filed on Tuesday by the city of San Francisco and nearby Santa Clara County, seeking to block this rule. All in all, there are 13 states filing in U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Washington that the new rule, quote, effects a radical overhaul of federal immigration law, transforming a system that promotes economic mobility among migrants into one that advantages migrants with wealth. I would urge them to define the term wealth. The other states in the lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security are Colorado, Delaware, Illinois, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico, Rhode Island, and Virginia. The Homeland Security Department did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Now, the reality here is that the liberal mindset is always focused on fairness. And as you know, fairness is the enemy of justice. And most Americans are focused on survival, financial survival, social, physical survival. The caring souls who want illegal immigrants in their states are willing to alienate and abandon the taxpayers in favor of what? Feelings? Federal government funding? Or proving that they are caring. And of course, you are not. We're starting to see some video from these places. It started in Baltimore. This week we saw San Francisco. And we know it exists in Los Angeles. What am I talking about? Trash on the streets. People living on the streets, urinating, defecating, sleeping, harassing any who would dare to pass by. In San Francisco, there are whole blocks, city blocks, people don't go on. And then there's the rats. We're starting to see the rats, large rats on television. And people who live in these areas complaining how their Democrat representatives in government are ignoring their situation. Did I mention this has been happening for decades in these areas? It's not an overnight thing. It's called political progressivism. We understand the political part, we're waiting for the progress part. President Donald Trump said on Thursday he supports meaningful background checks for gun buyers. But, he said, those responsible for recent mass shootings were mentally ill, and the United States should build more mental institutions. The question becomes just what have mental institutions done to cure mental illness? We can't even define mental illness. What is your mind? It is not your brain. What is it? And how is it ill? In what way is it ill? How did it get there? How do you fix it? This is institutionalized gobbledygook on the highest level. And you are the victims. These terms are thrown around to make it sound like people know what they're doing. And over 100 years of this sort of thing has proven they don't. Every 20 minutes there's a new thought, a new way, a new concept, a new therapy. Yo, we didn't have it right. We're going to change. Every time you turn around, it's like that. And they haven't fixed anything or anybody yet. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, he's a Democrat, has signed a bill into law requiring public schools in the state to include LGBT history in their curriculum. Now, what are the details here? Well, the legislation mandates that, quote, in public schools only, the teaching of history shall include a study of the roles and contributions of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people in the history of this country and this state. It goes into effect July 1st of next year. One of the bill's co-sponsors, State Senator Heather Steens, a Democrat, said after its passage in May, quote, "It is my hope that teaching students about the valuable contributions LGBTQ individuals have made throughout history will create a safer environment with fewer incidents of harassment." End of quote. Illinois joins 4 other states that have already passed similar legislation. They are California, Colorado, New Jersey, and Oregon. Anything else? Oh yeah, according to the Huffington Post, the new law in Illinois, quote, also includes similar mandates for African American history, and that of various other groups, including Polish, Irish, Italian, Hispanic, Asian Americans, end of quote. The text of the bill also states, quote, the teaching of history also shall include a study of the role of labor unions and their interaction with government in achieving the goals of a mixed free enterprise system, end of quote. Why not anarchists and murderers? They contributed, albeit through negative behaviors, but they were behind the law changes and other adjustments that were designed to make life better. What about them? There's no argument that people should not insult, embarrass, harass, and otherwise persecute those who are different, regardless of the difference. The argument of skin color is legitimate. Persecuting people for something like this is not simply foolish, it's detrimental to the larger societal purpose. The argument of not persecuting homosexuals is also legitimate. Our problem is that we're working very hard not to keep people from persecuting homosexuals, but to prove that these people are just simply different. Well, they aren't. They are deliberately damaging their bodies, damaging the culture, damaging the very image in which God made them. Their effort is contributing to societal decline, not betterment. The argument is that they can't help what they are. The facts are something entirely different. They aren't what they project themselves to be. They are the opposite, something they're not happy with. Which is saying what? Well, it's saying that God made a mistake. He made a freak. Now, there are babies born with a mixture of genetic material that makes boys act more effeminate and girls more masculine. That has always been the case. And these people have lived normal, happy lives as they adjusted to reality. Those who struggle are the ones who refuse to accept reality for what it is. You're a boy, but you feel like a girl. You're a girl, but you feel like a boy. You're still a girl. In the final analysis, it's an attack on God because He made you this way. But you hate it. Therefore, you hate Him. But now you see, we have the technology, we have the tools, we can fix it. But nowhere in human history has a baby boy been born a girl, or vice versa. Yeah, their lives can be very frustrating. Or they can make it peaceful. They can make peace with the whole thing. The difference is not in me. The difference is in them. It's in how they respond to what's going on. It's not their plumbing. It's not their dress code. It's adjusting to whatever the reality is. There are people born without an arm. They have to adjust. There are boys who are born who feel more the way girls feel. That's life. Deal with it. Adjust. Don't create a whole new gender. That's destructive. Did you see the event in Philadelphia this week where the police officers were getting shot up? You hear about the standoff? 6 police officers shot. What were they doing? They were trying to arrest a drug dealer. A reporter at the scene of of the attack on police officers said that the bystanders were mocking and taunting the police, even as bullets rained down upon them. The video shows a crowd of residents shoving and confronting the police, even as they were dealing with a tense, hostage situation. WorldNetDaily.com reports 34 attempts at school shootings in the last 12 to 18 months here in America. The argument is take the guns off the streets. The reality is criminals and crazies will always have guns. They can't buy them. They'll steal them. And the recent events have underscored the mental orientation of those who seek to commit these outrageous crimes. Their mindset is not like anything you nor I can imagine. Teenagers and young adults with no jobs, able to amass a small fortune in guns and ammunition? Where's the money coming from? They project their danger to society, and the people in their lives don't get it. Only after do they tell people just how strange the shooter was acting. One mother called the police recently, said her son was legally an adult and they could do nothing unless or until he committed a crime. Well, he did, and people died. And we blame the system, but it's really the home. We blame TV and internet when it's really the lack of training as they're growing up. You see, parents don't train anymore. They caretake. And many of them aren't doing a whole lot of that. They're out of the house 60 hours a week during the daytime. Let a school teacher say something bad about your kid and you go after the school teacher? We used to value school teachers and the input they gave. We used to understand that school teachers see our children when they're out from under our parental control. The information used to be considered valuable in the process of child rearing. Today, the teacher, the neighbor, whoever, who sees danger in your child's behavior and attitude is what? The enemy. You want to know just who is the enemy? The one who gives the 8-year-old their own cell phone. The one who's giving or does not monitor what their 6-year-old is watching on television or the internet. The one who thinks their child wouldn't do such a thing. The one who does not collect cell phones when the child walks in the front door of the house. Allows them free access 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and then blames society and everyone else for their child's bad attitudes and behaviors. Today, the world at large is training our children. And you're letting them do it. In many cases, even paying so they can do it. You bought the phone, and then you complain about the product on the other end. Does any of that make sense to you? Makes no sense to me. Do you know what Trump knows and everybody else seems not to know? It's about globalism. To illustrate, you need just to look at the European Union. Here's a monumental attempt to create a global community that's currently floundering. China is working to create a global community around them. Russia has done the same in the Balkans and the Middle East, wherever they have put their foot down. Turkey is just getting started, along with Iraq. Liberals in this country have been trying to jumpstart our participation. President Obama was overt in his efforts to downplay the U.S. and encourage every other economy. With Donald Trump, all this has crumbled. He won't play the game. Why not? He's not a globalist. He's a capitalist. That's what we used to be. Germany is now reduced to paying Russia for a direct oil pipeline. China is learning just how powerful the U.S. economy is. And the rest of the world complains about our success as though it's personal. They complain, that is, until they need us. The United States is on the way to being the major economic player in the world. Until the second half of the 20th century, that seemed to be the point. Without the U.S., Germany would have taken over all of Europe. China would have done the same with Korea and Japan, not to mention Southeast Asia. The United States is what holds our world together. And the world despises us for it. The United Nations is trying to destroy America's power while building up smaller nations at our expense. But none of this is working. And in the era of Trump, it's not likely to be. But I project forward another 4 or 5 years to 2024, when the Donalds' 8 years are up. What will happen then? The abortion debate popped up on the screen again this week. It's never going to go away. What's behind the abortion debate? What's behind those who have the mindset that says women should be able to kill their babies at will? Well, in a word, it's God. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, a Democrat from New York, called for the resignation of Republican Representative Steve King from Iowa via Twitter for his outrageous comment about rape and incest. What happened? Well, King, defending his anti-abortion position, said rape or incest is not reason enough to abort a child, talking to an audience earlier in the week. What if we went back, he said, through all the family trees and just pulled anyone who was a product of rape or incest? Would there be any population of the world left if we did that? The Republican was defending anti-abortion legislation he was sponsoring in Congress that did not have exceptions for rape or incest, and that outraged Ms. Gillibrand, who wants to allow for abortion no matter what. If the woman doesn't want to be pregnant, she should have the right to kill that innocent, defenseless child. Why? Well, because it's in her womb, and she doesn't want it there. Of course, she could have prevented it, but didn't. That error in judgment seems to be enough to sign a death warrant for an innocent child. I know it's not really a child until it's actually born. That's nonsense. That's the political emotional definition. It's not the scientific definition. It's not the medical definition. But most women are not scientists. And the anti-abortion theme doesn't get people elected. Gillibrand added, I believe pro-lifers are the moral equivalent of racists and anti-Semites. So there you have it. God's an anti-Semite. I know. But liberals don't have to make sense. They just have to make noise. That's the rundown for the week as far as my orientation is concerned. When we come back, we're going to talk about white people's bias against people of color. You didn't think there was such a thing?